Chapter 15. Arrow Escape. Ginger raced on, with Louise clinging to the saddle horn with one hand, the reins in the other. In desperation, the girl yanked up quickly on the reins, let them loose, then pulled them up short again. This unexpected maneuver slowed the runaway horse, and she finally stopped. "Don't scare me again like that, Ginger," Louise said, catching her breath. Then she patted the horse's neck affectionately. "Surely it wasn't just that little squirrel which frightened you," she went on. "Horses are supposed to have a sixth sense. Something strange is going on here. I wish you could tell me what it is you know that I don't." Jean, Mr. Strong, and the pack horse caught up to Louise in a few moments. They were relieved to see that she was still astride her horse and unharmed. The rancher agreed that Ginger had sensed some unseen danger from which she had tried to escape. "I sure wish I knew what danger," Mr. Strong said in concern, "and where it is." Jean added, "And I'd like to know more about that warning we heard. Maybe Ginger detected the scent of the person who gave it." "That could be," Mr. Strong said. "And was the warning from a friend or an enemy? And what prompted it?" The three riders had various theories. Mr. Strong thought possibly there was physical danger in the canyon, such as a threatened rock slide. Louise, recalling the previous explosion, suggested that perhaps a charge of dynamite was about to be set off at a quarry. "It would have detonated by this time," Jean remarked. "Anyway, we would have heard the blast." "I don't recall a quarry in this area," said Mr. Strong. "I think the warning was given by somebody who is trying to keep us away from here for a personal reason. I suggest we go on, but very cautiously. I know where there's a small branching canyon which leads to Lost Lake. We'll take that." He added that the girls would find the small canyon a longer and rougher route. Louise and Jean assured him that they did not mind. "Anything to avoid a dangerous lurking enemy," said Louise, who was still a bit shaken from her wild race on the runaway horse. The three riders started off once more. Each kept looking alertly ahead, behind, and to the left and right, both on the floor of the canyon and up at the benches atop the rocky walls. Mr. Strong had taken a pair of binoculars from his saddlebag and hung them around his neck. From time to time he used them, but neither he nor the girl saw anyone. After a half-hour's ride, Mr. Strong called out that the branching canyon was only a few yards ahead. "It's to the right. You can't miss it." The group had advanced only a few feet when suddenly they were startled by an arrow shot from the bench. It whizzed through the air directly in front of them and landed quivering in a gravelly spot between two rocks in the canyon floor. "Oh!" Louise and Jean cried out involuntarily. The riders had reined up instantly, their hearts pounding. Would their unknown attacker shoot more arrows? "Hug the wall," Mr. Strong ordered, and the three urged their horses to the side. There was a slight overhang of rocks here, which afforded some protection. They came to a halt and waited. No more arrows were shot into the canyon. "The one which nearly got us could have been a stray," Mr. Strong suggested. "Maybe some bowman was deer hunting and missed." Louise and Jean smiled ruefully. They were sure that the rancher was merely trying to allay any possible fears on their part. The girls did not contradict his theory, but both felt that the shooting of the arrow had been deliberate, and the sender was doing the same thing they were, playing a waiting game. Finally, Mr. Strong said, "I suggest we dismount and lead the horses. We'll stick close to the canyon wall and go ahead as planned. That way, anyone above us with itchy fingers on a bowstring can't reach us." Fortunately, the overhang of the cliff extended for some distance, and the trio proceeded in safety. The protective overhang eventually turned a corner into the branch canyon. As the three entered it single file, the girls gasped at the beauty ahead of them. The opening between the high, multicolored walls was little more than a gorge, with a shallow, rock-filled stream twisting through it. There was only a narrow strip of dry, stony earth on the right side, and the Danas realized that here and there it would be necessary for them to take their horses through the water in order to continue the trip. "We'll have to be very careful where we lead Ginger and Jubilee, or one of them might break a leg," Louise observed to her sister. At the point where the overhang ended, Mr. Strong told the girls to wait while he went ahead and made an investigation. "I want to avoid any more danger for you two," he said. "And for me, too," he added with a grin. After ground hitching his horse, he cautiously stepped into the open. Again using his binoculars, he swept the landscape for signs of any waiting attacker. "I don't see a soul," he reported. "I think it's safe for us to go on." Jean, in the lead, scrutinized the ground carefully so that Jubilee would not step into a hole or skid on a slippery rock. Every so often, the girl and her companions would stop and gaze all around as a precaution against any furtive movements of an enemy. Still no one appeared, and gradually the travelers' immediate fears left them. It was during a pause to rest the horses that Jean noticed something unusual ahead. She led Jubilee on. Directly ahead of the narrow trail, a crudely built ladder stood against the canyon wall. By the time the others reached Jean, she was staring in fascination at the rungs. "These rungs are wet and muddy," she exclaimed. "Somebody has climbed them recently." Louise asked Mr. Strong if anyone lived in the canyon. He shook his head. "Not that I know of. Long ago, Indians made their home here, so I'm told, but they've been gone nearly 1,000 years. The three riders speculated on the puzzle of the ladder. Who had put it there? Who was using it? And why? "It might have been used by the person who shot that arrow," Jean suggested. "He may have known a shortcut to this spot and beat us here." "If that's the case," said Mr. Strong, "the bowman might not be an enemy. If he were on this bench above, he could easily have heard our approach and shot another arrow." "If the person using the ladder isn't waiting to harm us, what is he doing here?" Louise asked. The rancher laughed. "I'd say he came down to get some water." "But where did he take it?" Louise persisted. "Your guess is as good as mine," Mr. Strong said. "He could be a hunter, a camper, or an archaeologist. Such people wander around the Rocky Mountains all the time." "There's one way to find out," said Jean. "Go up the ladder and take a look." "Don't forget our main job," Louise reminded her. "It's to reach Lost Lake and hunt for Baron. We'll use up precious time if we look around that bench." Mr. Strong chuckled. "A house divided against itself, eh?" he quoted. "Suppose I toss a coin to settle the argument." He produced a 25-cent piece and said, "Heads, we go right on to Lost Lake. If it's tails, you may have the pleasure of climbing that ladder, Jean. Okay?"
Okay,
the girls chorused. The rancher tossed the coin into the air, caught it on the back of his hand, and covered it with the palm of his other hand. He waited and grinned at the Danas, creating suspense. Finally, Mr. Strong lifted his palm. "Jean, you win. The side with the eagles, face up." Laughing, Jean lost no time in climbing the ladder. The others waited breathlessly for her report. She stepped onto the rocky bench, then a few seconds later called down, "Oh, this is amazing! Come on up! There are marvelous cliff dwellings just a little way from here in a giant pit." Excitedly, Louise ascended the ladder. When she reached the top, Mr. Strong followed. Together, they walked to the edge of the pit for a closer look at the ruins. The ancient buildings were extensive, and though in a crumbling state, told the story that once this had been a very productive and prosperous Indian center. "It looks like a whole village with a palace in the middle," Louise noted. Jean agreed, then began to laugh. "There's not a soul around. One of the Indians' ghosts must have been using that ladder." The words were hardly out of her mouth when the group suddenly saw a man step into the open from behind one of the circular walled structures. "We must find out who he is," Louise said excitedly. Mr. Strong called down to him in a loud voice. The man in the ruins looked up, startled. End of chapter 15.